Well, first, I should say strategic patience was a phrase that the Obama administration started using several years ago, following a North Korea and I think nuclear test at that time. And at that time, the administration was signaling that it wasn't going to be, if you like, stampeded into some kind of renewed negotiations immediately following a provocation by North Korea. Frankly, I think by the end of the Obama administration, the phrase strategic patience had kind of was past its sell-by date, and indeed, Secretary Tillerson announced, just as you said, that it's over. But in fact, what he outlined was something that sounds a lot like the Obama administration's policy, and that is ratcheting up sanctions, including multilateral sanctions, in an effort to bring greater pressure on the regime.
Why do you think this regime continues to take such, in a sense, an aggressive stance towards the United States and the rest of the world when it comes to testing now these ballistic missile systems? We know that they have nuclear warheads. Why are they continuing to push when in some ways they achieved what they wanted to, which is a regime of security here by having nuclear weapons, by being able to say, look, we have a line of defense that you can't take away from us?
Well, I think if you look at what the leadership, including Kim Jong-un in his January 1st, his New Year's speech said, they don't think they're quite there yet. I think you're right that they see, and indeed they've said that they think that nuclear weapons and that capability, including the ability to deploy them on the top of missiles and deliver them, is a security guarantee and a deterrent for them. But they don't think they're quite there yet. And in fact, particularly under the leadership of the third Kim, Kim Jong-un, who's now been in power for about 6 years, he has really doubled down on trying to have what he believes, and I guess it's in the eye of, in this case, the possessor, a credible nuclear deterrent, which includes in his mind, as he announced on January 1st, the ability to deliver such a weapon on an intercontinental missile as well as a short and medium term. So they don't think they're quite there yet, and they think that they're getting closer to it. And I think the sense of insecurity is real. The way they're trying to ensure their security, ironically, I think makes them actually far less secure.
It certainly does, and I guess it leaves the world in a bit of a quandary because, you know, we've tried to follow a traditional regime of sanctions, of multilateral, unilateral pressure. None of this seems to be working. They seem to be pushing, as you said, towards intercontinental ballistic missiles. So what is the path forward? I mean, if it's not armed military intervention, what is reasonably a way to de-escalate when nothing seems to have worked so far?
Yeah, well, it's very, very challenging, and I think most would agree, perhaps one of the most challenging security situations we face anywhere in the world, and it's only gotten worse. I think we do have to try to learn from our past efforts. And I think the only way forward is a combination of options, if you like, together with ever closer coordination, particularly with China, but also with our allies, South Korea and Japan, and indeed with the international community. And by that, I mean still, as I think Secretary Tillerson outlined, a doubling down on sanctions. Sanctions are a blunt instrument. The timetable is uncertain, but we have to hope that over time, they have an impact in changing the calculus of the regime and making it more amenable to entering some kind of negotiation. And we need to offer some kind of negotiating path forward. And sometimes when you do have a new administration, we have one obviously now here in Washington, there'll be a new one in Seoul soon. Maybe it's a time when together with the Chinese, we can come up with a package which, combined with pressure, can encourage the North Koreans back into some sort of negotiating process. But in the meantime, there also has to be, I think, greater attention to how we try to mitigate in terms of defense and deterrence, and also how we try to weaken their program, and including by some things that have been reported in the press, as we did in Iran, by trying to use some cyber and other methods to try to slow down their progress.
Look, I think global markets, investors around the world want to know, is armed conflict really off the table? Despite all the bluster on both sides, are the risks just too great to South Korea, to Japan, and to North Korea itself? And whatever happens in the end, either preservation of the status quo or, let's hope, some kind of de-escalation, the reality is we're not heading towards armed conflict. Is that your take?
Well, I think that we're not inexorably heading towards armed conflict. We're dealing with the Korean peninsula, where since 1953 we've had an armistice, not a peace treaty. And yet within that environment, I think thanks in many ways to the commitment of the United States and some other members of the international community and South Korea's own success, we've had a remarkably, if you like, stable environment where obviously many countries, not only South Korea, but also China and others, have enjoyed great prosperity and growth in an atmosphere of relative stability. The path that North Korea has doubled down on in the past several years, and particularly the nuclear and missile development, has raised tensions and I think raised dangers to a level as high as I've ever seen them. And I've been following Korea for over 40 years. So I'm very worried about it. I think we do have to be prepared for all contingencies. That sounds like maybe empty language, but in this case, we really do have to be prepared. And we also have to be very mindful of the chances of miscalculation and of escalation. And that's one reason why I think a very tough defensive approach needs to be combined with keeping some kind of lines open of communication with Beijing, but also with Pyongyang, if at all possible.